and things and stuff. We should have a musical episode, but not today because it is episode 269 of the In the Tank podcast. We're going to be talking about socialism. We're going to be talking about AOC and, maybe some election stuff. We'll see. Also, stay tuned because we've got a Justin's hate mailbag on episode 269 of the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. And I am joined by Justin Haskins, editorial director at the Heartland Institute. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I think we need a some kind of a graphic for hate mail. I'm imagining some kind of a hate mail graphic. Maybe it could be like a cartoon. Yeah, like some kind of cartoon. Yeah, like maybe it could be like a piece of mail, like stabbing me in the back or something. I don't know. And then we could have I'm
just a bill guy. Just a bill guy.
Yeah, exactly. Except he's stabbing me. Not teaching kids about the importance of the Constitution.
Right.
I think that's what we should do. So we should get working on that.
All right, Andy, get on that. Also joining us, we have Isaac Orr, research fellow of the Center of the American Experiment. Wow, Andy, you just your job was in jeopardy last week because you couldn't find Minnesota on the map. But quick with that drawing there. That's good. Isaac Orr, how are you?
Just fine and dandy here, Donald.
Awesome. Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm here in Illinois, awaiting Lockdown 2, Tyranny Boogaloo. Which is expected any day now. And I will just add that I think Justin's face just reads to the audience hate, especially hate mail. So you don't need to do anything special.
The face of hate. All right. So, I do want to kind of get into our topics right off the bat here. But before we do, the end of the year is coming up and we want to do some more interactive stuff with the audience and whatever. So right off the bat, I just want to say, if you want to get us your comments, suggestions, questions to the show, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. We're going to do a couple of episodes towards the end of the year, top 5 Trump moments during his first term, and then maybe like a bottom 5 moments during his first term, because obviously there's a second term coming up, but we'll get to that towards the end of the show. In the tank podcast @gmail.com. Send your hate mail. But gentlemen, let's get to it here. So it's a time for unity. Okay. So we're assuming that Trump is going to lose for just the sake of this segment, but we all know the truth. Anyways, time for unity is what Biden is saying during his victory speech on Saturday, premature victory speech. President-elect, in quotes, Biden called for unity and healing. He reached out to the people that voted against him. He says it's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, to lower the temperature, to see each other again, to listen to each other again, to make progress. We must stop treating our opponents as our enemies, Biden said. We're not enemies. We're all Americans. And then about 5 minutes later, AOC tried to put a hit list on pretty much every conservative that has anything to do with Trump.
I saw a news report. Democrats propose sending Republicans to unity camps.
Those that don't recognize that voice, that's Isaac Orr. For some reason, his voice is deeper today. It's probably COVID related.
No, I think that's what happens after puberty, right?
It's a very late bloomer, everybody.
Going through the changes. We're here for you, Isaac.
So AOC put on Twitter, is anyone archiving these Trump sycophants for when they try to downplay or deny their complicity in the future? She wrote on Twitter. I foresee decent probability of many deleted tweets, writings, photos in the future. So, I mean, this has kind of been, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit here. This has kind of been blown out of proportion a little bit. I think that she's just trying to say, you were a big Trump supporter and we're not going to forget that. But it's, the fact that she calls herself a democratic socialist and the history of socialism in the world, it's like the optics of a socialist putting together a political enemies list is kind of scary. So, Jim, where do you fall on this one?
Well, I want to know how I can get on that list. Is there an email that I can send or a form I can fill out online? I mean, if I'm not on that list, I really feel like I'm being left out. But you're right. This is the kind of thing that happens in socialist hellholes like Venezuela and happened in the Soviet Union is that, and actually, this is the first stage. The second stage is when the left starts to, eat their own. And in Venezuela, they almost have to do that. They're so out of food and poor. But it's always recriminations, and it's always punishing your enemies. For all of the talk that Trump was a tyrant, he never did anything like this, and never even hinted at doing anything like this. In fact, he didn't, as far as I can see, he didn't violate the Constitution or even come close to it in any way, as opposed to Obama.
But he called CNN fake news. Yeah, but he called so fascist. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, his tweets are so terrible. I know. No, but I want to get on this list. So, I'm calling it out now. If any lefties are listening to this podcast, Jim Lakely, I'm not hard to find. I'm at heartland.org. You can just submit me to the list. Let me know so that I can, put a sign of some sort outside my house so that everybody knows that I'm going to be unpersoned soon, so that they can come visit me before that happens.
You got to wear a MAGA armband, I think, for the duration.
or on my coat or something like that. I don't know. But look,
forehead tattoo.
Yeah, forehead tattoo. Yeah, that might do it. No, but look, this is coming in the wake almost exactly at the same time Biden said it's time for unity. They're not interested in unity. They've never been interested in unity. And after what Trump, the Obama administration sicked the highest levels of the investigatory arms of the federal government upon Trump and his supporters before he was even inaugurated, before he even won the election. And then spent 4 years, they impeached him for nothing. They tried to destroy him and his presidency nonstop for 4 years. And now, come on, let's all come together. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of people on the right that, if Biden takes the White House, are going to be wondering why #resist isn't trending anymore. Well, actually, I bet it will trend. And we'll see how that works out.
Justin, feel free to jump in here. Do you think the calls for unity are going to overshadow the calls of blacklisting 70 million Americans?
I think I think you have to differentiate between real calls for unity and calls for unity that you do to score political points. And so if you're asking me, do I think there'll be lots of calls for unity? Yeah, I think there'll be tons of them coming from Joe Biden. I just don't think that they're legitimate. I think that they're all garbage. But I do believe he's going to do it because I think he recognizes the political advantage to taking that position when the country knows that it's divided, feels very divided. What I think a lot of people in the middle want is they want someone to say, let's bring the country together. And so Joe Biden's going to try to jump into that and win those people over right from the very beginning. But do I actually think he's interested in bringing the country together? Of course not. And the only unity that Joe Biden is interested in is the unity on the left. That's the only thing that he really, truly cares about, because that's the only thing that can stop him from getting his agenda accomplished. If he can't get the far, far left wing of the party on board with, the more establishment wing of the party, then I think they're going to squander all of these opportunities that they may have if he does in fact become president. And I think that that's the real danger. And that's why he spent so much time trying to win those people over throughout the campaign. That's why we had unity task forces with Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. There were no Republicans on that unity task force. There were no conservatives. Why? Because the only unity he cares about is the unity within the left. And if I'm wrong, then why didn't he include people on the unity task forces from any other part of the political spectrum? No, he had people who support the Green New Deal. He had eco-socialists. He had Stephanie Kelton, who doesn't believe in debts and deficits. He had people who want a federal jobs guarantee, but he didn't have anybody on the right. And that tells you everything you need to know about it.
Isaac, you're going to jump in?
He let John Kasich talk at the Democratic National Convention.
That's right. I forgot.
Blows your argument out of the water.
Yeah, I forgot about John Kasich.
So,
yeah, do it. Let's make our own list.
Here's something that we need to. I have a list, and the list includes John Kasich, and that's it. And here's what I want. I think
what's the title of that list?
it doesn't need a title. It's just John Kasich. And look, I think America could get behind this proposal. Let's just take John Kasich, tie him to a raft, and throw him out into the Pacific Ocean and let him drift away from America so that we never have to deal with him again. Because frankly, he's horrible. Nobody likes him. I don't know how this guy ever became popular in the first place. I don't know why we're even. My God, like I don't even want to see his face.
He looks like Smeagol from Lord of the Rings.
I feel.
He's just like not
and I feel, and even seeing his stupid face makes me like it's a microaggression that you're doing this, just showing his face on the screen. That's an even worse microaggression. Look at this clown. Like, get this guy out of here. I just. Why do you have to bring him up? Why?
I don't even know how we got to that, but yeah. So AOC made that tweet, and I honestly think that.
I want to know what happens to like all the people on John Kasich's list.
There aren't any other people. It's a one-man list. That's the point.
And they're out pushed out into the Pacific.
If we just get rid of John Kasich, the mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. That's all we. That would solve so many of our problems. This guy has caused more division in this country than the vast majority of people walking around just by being a prop for the left and him being able to be dragged out there and say, look, here's Republican. Republicans agree with us too. They also hate Donald Trump.
Can we put Mitt Romney on that
list?
Mitt
Romney is on that list too.
At least Mitt Romney.
That's his Tinder profile picture.
That is amazing picture.
Folks, if you're not watching on YouTube right now, you need
you're
to.
Missing out.
You really are missing out.
You really are missing out. Look, I even Mitt Romney voted for Amy Coney Barrett. Even he was willing to do that. Like John Kasich will do everything possible to improve himself. And at the expense of everybody else. Like he is just the constant fly in the ointment. I mean, that's what he is. And it's awful. Again, I don't even know why we're talking about him.
I don't know. I honestly don't. I can't follow that how we got down that path.
One thing we know is that Trump derangement syndrome is going to far outlive Trump's presidency, whenever that may end. I think that is absolutely clear with these lists of recriminations of the othering of anyone who supported Donald Trump. I mean, look, they call everybody who supports Donald Trump has been called Nazis. I mean, this was just yesterday. James Clyburn, I think, just yesterday or 2 days ago, basically called Trump Hitler and his followers Nazis on CNN. I mean, this is not going to end. That people who support and supported Donald Trump are going to continue to be othered by our dominant media and pop culture in this country. And I just want to say one more thing before I forget about it. And if this is the end of the Trump presidency, I hope right before he leaves office, he appoints an independent counsel to look into Hunter and Joe Biden and their connections to China and Ukraine and money, and then he declassifies everything, because one of the most disappointing things about the possible end of a Trump administration is the fact that all of these crooks, all these people that abused enormous power in the federal government are all just going to walk away. So declassify everything and make sure everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah,
tell us about Area 51, Donald.
That's exactly. Why not? Right. Do that too.
Show us the files. Show us the X-Files. That we'll save that discussion about the potential world after Trump. After he loses, or if he loses, I'll say if. So yeah, we'll have that discussion later if it's even relevant. But yeah, so AOC again, kind of defending her a little bit. I honestly think that her tweet was more or less just like, if you're going to try to deny that you were a big Trump person, after you're like ashamed of him after he's gone, like we're going to remember. I think that's all it really was. But that didn't stop a lot of her supporters from putting together the Trump Accountability Project, which is a poorly made website that promises to basically hold everybody that supported Trump in any way accountable for their actions. So this includes, those who elected him, those who staffed his government, and those who funded him. So some of the news outlets out there, like when they report on this, they make it seem like it's just people that kind of served in as an administration. But if you go to the website, it says specifically that they want to hold people accountable who elected him. So that's like 70 million people that they want to hold accountable. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not necessarily going to put the blame on AOC specifically, but like, man, did the left go fascist real quick. Like as soon as they got a taste of power, like boom, fascism. They went from anti-fascism to fascism real quick.
They've never been anti-fascism, but okay.
Well, no, I know that, but that's what they'll claim. Isaac, are you concerned about this at all, or do you think it's just them throwing a tantrum?
I mean, I don't like it. Nobody likes to be put on a list like, oh, hey, by the way, like I don't like my DSmog blog profile
No,
all the time, right?
That's my favorite profile of you, actually.
It's kind of fun. Like
it's really not the most unflattering. Like you've got some pretty good points that are made in there.
They're surprisingly fair sometimes, but it's like,
yeah. Does it mention that you're on this podcast on there? They got to update it.
Yeah, they actually quote some of the podcasts that we do, like Wind and Solar Are Terrible.
Nice.
They take like an extended quote, and I was like, oh man, people actually listen to this?
Keep scrolling, Andy. I want to see this.
Yeah. And then they have like key deeds or something like that. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, It is a little like scary to know that if they ever actually got as powerful as they want to be, that like this would be the list of people they'd be running.
Yeah,
for unity camps,
no doubt,
right?
No doubt. Oh, look at that! Key deeds Orr appeared on the episode 250 of the Heartland Institute's In the Tank podcast, along with Jim Lakely and Michael Schellenberger. Oh my God, they didn't even mention me. Screw this. Turn this off. Turn this off.
I also love how just you appearing, is that the need?
Yeah.
It's just you're here, you're there, you were there. Like you may have
that's
disagreed.
a big picture of you too, Jim. Like they could find way worse pictures of us.
Yeah.
How about the one with the tinfoil hat that you've got on your Twitter account? They could use that.
I know they should grab that one. Yeah. Yeah, that one there was from about 2008 or so, a while back.
Yeah. So I don't know. Let's see what happens. But this isn't the first time that they started putting together a list like this. Just before the election, there was some like Trump donor.com thing where they were showing like a map. You could like search your neighborhood and find out everyone in your neighborhood that voted that donated to Trump's campaign.
Sure.
I'm sure so that you could have a civil conversation with them and convince them why they're wrong and shouldn't support someone like Trump or firebomb their house. I don't know.
If they actually start coming after either digitally, professionally, or personally, there it is. Yeah. If these people start coming after Trump people, I don't think it's going to turn out the way they hope.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about that. All right, well, let's get on to our first real topic here. So, we're not completely in the aftermath of the election because it seems like there's a few key races that are still left to be decided. But there's a couple of stories that came out that seem a little contradictory, and I'm going to have Justin explain some of this for us. But it's just about like how the socialists fared in the 2020 election. So right in the days after the election, there was a couple of articles. Justin, you actually wrote one of these. I don't know if it ever ended up anywhere yet.
It'll be Fox News on Friday.
Oh, no kidding. All right, cool.
Wait, you're going to be on traitorous Fox News?
Oh, no.
Wow. I never took you for such a weakling, Justin. Why are you on Fox?
Justin,
you could be on OAN or Newsmax.
Yeah, Justin's the one that
I canceled
Arizona on Fox News. That's his fault.
Yes, listeners, it was Justin's fault. He's the one that said, call Arizona for Biden.
Actually, I wasn't the one that said it on the air, but I was the one in the back room, like trying to convince them to do it. They were like, no, I don't think we should call it. And I said, no, you guys got to call it right now. 1% of the vote in, you guys got to call it. It's over.
All this anti-Fox News stuff is Justin's fault.
Yes,
so
it turns out it's all me. Yeah.
Unfollow him on Twitter at Justin T. Haskins. Unfollow him. But yeah, so there was a Reason article as well. 2020 election looks like a massive rebuke of socialism. So it says, summarizing the key lessons that Democrats should take away from the election results that were much less favorable than expected, Representative Abigail Spanberger of Virginia reportedly told fellow members of her caucus during a conference call on Thursday after the election that they shouldn't say the word socialism ever again. So their explanation for this in this article is that one of the big reasons for losing Florida was because of the anti-socialism message that resonated with a lot of people that come from South American countries and Cuba. So and there was another article that Justin actually sent me that just focused on that specific thing. And it really made the case that like Democrats might never win that state again if they like fail to condemn socialism. So like that's a very important point. But then some of the other points that they make is that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren failed to beat Biden, which, I mean, we knew that how long ago. But then looking at Justin's soon-to-be-published article, you started talking about some of the things that you talked about on the last episode, which is that the Senate will likely stay with the Republicans, which is going to really hamper any of these really radical agenda by the Harris administration. Dems losing seats in the House and the impact that could have, state races that lead Republican, proposals in certain states that failed, like the fair tax in Illinois, and that just basically that the blue wave turned out to be not much more than a couple of ripples. So, Justin, anything to elaborate on that? Just the point that it seems like on its face that socialists are kind of licking their wounds after this, or at least the socialist agenda is licking their wounds after the election. Yeah,
I mean, there's no denying that that's definitely the case if you're going to look at it in terms of the power dynamics after the election. No matter how things shape out, it's pretty clear that unless Democrats flip these 2 seats in Georgia and they end up taking control of the Senate, their agenda took a massive hit. They lost seats in the House, as you said. They didn't flip any. They may flip one state legislature. That would be Arizona, but they lost one state legislature in New Hampshire. So they didn't gain any ground at the state level. They didn't flip any gubernatorial seats. So, I mean, there's no question about it. The Democrat Party, forget about socialists, just the Democrat Party in general, just did not have a very good day outside of possibly the presidency. That's the only area where really they can walk away from all of this and say this isn't a disaster. If Donald Trump had won, or if it turns out Donald Trump did win, that's how we're saying it.
Thank you.
If it turns out that Donald Trump is going to get a second term, then this was a total train wreck of a day for them. A total train wreck. That's the only thing that makes it not a train wreck at this point. So yeah, the socialist agenda, Democratic Party agenda in general, it was a really bad day for them.
Jim, anything to add on to that before I bring up this Stopping Socialism exclusive?
No, I would just say that it was actually a pretty bad day all around. The Wall Street Journal had an editorial out today, Thursday, when we're recording this, that says that basically saying the socialism had a horrible day. And they looked just at the state of California as an example. The state of California, they rejected a referendum that would have allowed racial preferences in state hiring and college admissions, which is something the hard left pushed for very hard. That went down to defeat. Massive business property tax hike was also rejected. And then there was this idea to basically unionize gig jobs like Uber and Lyft and things like that, that the left has been pushing for a long time. That went down with an easy defeat as well. You add that to the fact that Justin, the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, basically has been pushed out of her job because they did so poorly in the House. There was a moderate Democrat in Virginia named Abigail Spanberger who got on a conference call, and this got leaked out on Twitter a few days ago. She said, "Stop saying all that socialism S. It's killing us. We're getting killed with that stuff." So AOC and Ilhan Omar, who went on to easy victories and will for as long as they would feel like going on to easy victories, can show their socialist feathers all they want, and I hope they do, because it's hurting the party all across the country.
Is that true though? Because every co-sponsor of the Green New Deal in the House got reelected.
Because they're in hard left districts. So yeah, That's why. But it's killing the party across the board. I mean, here we go. I mean, just talk about Fox.
I love that that's the lesson that they're taking away from it, though. Like AOC says, look, we all got reelected, so why didn't you run on it?
Yeah, I know,
it's
right?
perfect.
So I think socialism took a bath. I mean, I think Justin's going to maybe argue a little bit differently because there are other factors at play here. But I thought it was a better day for liberty. If Trump is ultimately defeated, I think it's still a better day for liberty than it could have been, especially if the Senate was to go over to the Democrats. Then we'd be in real trouble.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this was kind of what we've been talking about is this kind of this angle in the week after the election, but then the Stopping Socialism exclusive that Justin was working on that was just released like yesterday. Socialist candidates won more seats than ever in 2020 election. So what this is, and you could probably explain it better than I can, Justin, but you decided to do an autopsy on the socialist success, seeing how the candidates that were endorsed by socialist groups fared during their elections. This is at local, state, federal level. So before you kind of explain some of your findings and all of that, what was your hypothesis before the autopsy? Like, what were you expecting to find?
So we did a similar analysis in 2018 for the midterm elections. That was the first one that we did. And, what we found were there were about 86 or so, it was in the 80s. I think it was 86 races that included candidates who had been endorsed by these radical groups like Democratic Socialists of America, Progressive Democrats of America, and Our Revolution, which was started by Bernie Sanders as sort of a spinoff of his 2016 campaign. And they did not do very well, relatively speaking. They won about 40% of their races in 2018. And so, but people were kind of shocked by that. I mean, the fact that you had socialists winning, any number of seats was pretty surprising. And so I expected it to improve a little bit. I did not expect to it improve by as much as I think it ended up improving.
Okay, so what happened? Explain. What were the results here?
So we found when looking at the endorsement lists for these groups that I just had mentioned, there were 266 candidates listed among those that were endorsed. These groups, just to give you a sense of what kind of policies they support things like the Green New Deal, like Medicare for all, pretty radical criminal justice reforms, defunding the police in some cases, that sort of thing. So these are pretty radical groups. The Democratic Socialists of America is the largest socialist organization in the United States today. It's not a political party, it's a group. By the way, if you haven't seen on Stopping Socialism TV or YouTube channel the video of the Democratic Socialists of America convention and Donnie and I doing the commentary on that convention, it's awesome. You gotta watch
it's absolutely ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous. That needs to go in the show notes. But anyway, what we did was we looked at the 266 candidates and we found that, and that just in and of itself is incredible. We went from mid 80s to 266 candidates. Yeah. And of the 266 candidates, we found that 90% won their races. Actually, a little more than 90% won their races. And most of those races were in the state legislative level. So we were primarily focused on state legislative seats, U.S. House, U.S. Senate, and then any sort of executive stuff at the state level. And 200 of the 266 seats were at the state legislative level in 29 states, and then in Washington, D.C., I think, had a person as well. So the takeaway is, I think, when you actually look at these candidates, when you look at the races, when you look at the success rate, the average candidate on this list, and this includes the candidates that lost, the average candidate on this list won their race by more than 25 percentage points. Okay. So they were blowing them out. And that does not include uncontested races, because there were uncontested races too. What this tells you is that the far left primaried a lot of establishment existing Democratic office holders and in heavily Democratic districts, and replaced them, at least this is what we think happened, with much more radical socialist and far left progressive candidates. And so we believe that this is evidence of the far left, hard evidence of the far left actually taking over the Democratic Party or moving in that direction. It's also possible that in some of these cases, these candidates on the list were not new people. They had won office previously, but we believe that they may be shifting to the left, and that might explain why they're now being endorsed, but weren't endorsed in, say, 2018 or 2016 or something like that. But many of the candidates were actually new candidates for office. And in some places, they won some pretty, very surprising races. There was one in Maine in particular that was very interesting, where a longtime Republican was unseated I believe it was in the state Senate, by a far left-wing socialist, Green New Deal person. And in the same district, from what the article that I read, and I haven't verified this, but I'm counting on the article to be right, Susan Collins actually won that district. So even though Susan Collins, a Republican, won that district, they threw out a longtime Republican incumbent and replaced it with a Green New Deal, far left-wing socialist, or progressive. That's pretty incredible. So we're seeing a takeover, an actual takeover of the Democratic Party. We're seeing them stack what they call the bench at the state legislative level. It's a place where the state legislatures are a place where you go to find, the party establishment goes to find who's going to be the next AOC in the House, who's going to be the next Senate leader. Like, this is where they go to find their up and comers. It's at the state legislative level. Most members of Congress at one point in time served in state legislatures. It's like the minor leagues are getting filled up by these more radical left socialist types. And it's not necessarily materializing in the major leagues, at the higher state and federal levels, but it's the minor leagues that are being taken over here. Right. Now, there were some radicals that won at the U.S. House level too, but there were obviously a lot fewer of them relative to 200 state legislative seats. Of course, there are more state legislators. There are thousands of state legislators, so it's a different kind of scenario. I think we found that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of, I have the numbers here in front of me, I think it was 60 U.S. House seats. So there were 60 people in the U.S. House that were endorsed. And I don't know exactly how many of those people ended up in, but remember, not over 90% of the candidates on the whole list. So it must have been a very high percentage one. So it is happening at the federal level too. But it's at the state level that I'm especially interested in it. And if you go to the Our Revolution website, again, that's one of the groups we looked at. They have a 4-point plan for how they're going to win. Win what? I don't know, but this is what they say. This is how they're going to win. Step 1 is defeat Trump. Step 2, elect a progressive Congress. That didn't work out very well for them. Step 3 is build a bench. And step 4 is organize a movement. And when you read about what they have to say about building a bench, build a down ballot bench of progressive champions and policies, and you read about what that means to them, it means take over these state legislatures, that take over the districts that we can win over. And over time, what we'll be able to do is shift the ideology of the party, of the Democratic Party, further and further to the left. Let's get rid of all of these establishment people. It's sort of like, it's a more organized version of what happened with the Tea Party on the right in 2010, where people were sick and tired on the right of all these establishment Republicans who just weren't getting the job done. And so they started throwing them out all over the country and putting Tea Party people in who are seen as being the more ideologically pure candidates. That's what's going on here, but in a much more, I think, organized and in a lot of ways effective way. And this is just the beginning. This is going to continue for years to come. That's the plan. That's how they got AOC into office. She was a nobody until a group like this came along and helped her get into Congress. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to build a whole army of people just like that all across the country.
Yeah, step 5, I think, is building a list. Step 6 is re-education camps. Step 7 is handing out brown shirts. So it's just they're not showing their whole plan there. Okay, so just between those two things that we just talked about, that reason piece and the piece that is upcoming that you produced, and then that exclusive from stoppingsocialism.com, I think the average person listening to this might see isn't there a contradiction here? So how can you say that like socialism took a hit, but then say, you know, socialism is taking over? Like meld those two things together.
Right. Well, you have two goals, right? Two main goals. If you're on the far left, you have two goals. One goal is you want to wield as much power as possible in government, right? And that on that goal, they had a very bad day. Okay, they had a very bad day. They lost lots of races. They are not in control. In fact, they've lost power in government. You could argue, again, excluding what happened with Joe Biden. But the second goal is wield more power within the Democratic Party, which helps them in the long run wield more power over government, right? And on that goal, they achieved a lot. I think they are growing in power and in influence in the Democratic Party, and we've known that for a long time just by looking at what's been going on with Bernie Sanders, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, etc. But this is the first time we've been able to look at it and say, wow, we have numbers here. This was 266 people who signed up to this with this ideology, who are out there promoting this. 90% of them won their races. This is real tangible data that shows us that this is actually happening. It's not just a figment of the imaginations of the people on the right. There really is a far left that's trying to take over the Democratic Party. And I think that it's actually in the early stages of this happening. Again, only 40% of the candidates in 2018 that we tracked won their races. Only 40%. And there were only 86 races. Now there's 266 races and more than 90% are winning. That is a big jump in just 2 years. They're making real progress on this goal.
So I guess my analogy for this would be that maybe like the Democrats' pie, as it represents in the government, shrank a little bit, you know, minus Biden maybe winning, shrank a little bit, but the socialist portion of that pie actually grew, right? Is that a good analogy?
I would say that I would argue that I would say that's probably accurate.
It's a great analogy. Just
I would say that it would be better if you had like a Democrat, you know, segment of the pie, and then within that segment, the socialist wing grew larger. Because I don't know that you could say total.
Let me do the analogies. Jim, do you have any questions about this? Any responses or questions about this?
No, I mean, well, the Heartland Institute are kind of our wheelhouse for now 36 years has been outreach and communication and education with state legislators. And it is true that most members of Congress were once a state legislator. And so while in Congress, the all socialism all the time, the lifting of the squad, I still remember how many magazine covers had Nancy Pelosi and AOC and the whole squad smiling. I think Rolling Stone had one. Vanity Fair may have had one. You know, all of that was just on the rise. And only 2 years ago, I mean, this sweep of socialism into the House of Representatives was only in 2018. So it's still relatively new, but it was just so wafted up by our lickspittle press that, you know, it became this big thing. The irony is that I think Nancy Pelosi, because while it's something to keep an eye on and is very significant that so many state legislators are flat out socialists, if not even farther to the left, is that Nancy Pelosi, it was such a disaster in the House. So many people who voted, maybe voted for Biden, but didn't vote for the Democrat candidate for Congress. And again, I think the fact that technically the Democrats will hold on to the House, but it will be by the skin of their teeth, by maybe 1 or 2 or at most maybe 3 seats. I think it is extremely likely that Nancy Pelosi, even with Democrat majority in the House of Representatives, will not be reelected as Speaker of the House, because I think there are enough, well, maybe a handful of moderates that are still left in the Democratic Party in Congress will not vote for her because her leadership almost had them lose the House. And then the socialists don't want her there either. I don't think we're going to have Speaker AOC, but if Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House in the next Congress, she will be one of the weakest speakers in history.
Yeah, physically as well. So
she's 80. Come on.
That's it. So I saw an article, I forget who was quoted saying this, but they were pretty confident that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have the votes to be Speaker of the House again. Does that mean it's going to lurch to the left, or is it going to moderate out? Predictions? Guesses? Anyone? Isaac, you probably have a read on this. Good talk.
Why would you? You knew I wasn't paying attention, you jerk. So no, it's gonna be crazy Nancy from here on out. They're gonna bury her with that gavel.
Justin, we were talking about this before. You're not so sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's really hard to predict this sort of thing. I remember rumblings in the past of Nancy Pelosi maybe, losing power and whatever, and she ended up keeping it. I mean, these establishment people, the congressional world, the congressional bubble, they have totally different rules and totally different understanding of how these things operate. And there's all these unwritten rules, and typically the people who are there the longest tend to get what they want. And Nancy Pelosi has been there forever. And so I don't know, we'll see what happens. She's a political swamp creature, one of the best. And I think that if she survives as speaker, that wouldn't shock me. But it also wouldn't shock me if, the Republican caucus goes to the more moderate part of the Democratic Party, which is small, but it does exist, and says, hey, look, let's just get together and we pick somebody. We'll pick a moderate Democrat.
A call for unity.
And, well, it's not even really unity so much as it is just let's get Nancy Pelosi out, right? We all hate Nancy Pelosi. Can't we agree on that? And at the very least, what that will do is it will give that moderate part of the Democratic Party a gigantic chip at the table in negotiating who will be the next speaker, because they can go to the party leadership and say, look, we don't want Nancy. We want somebody else. And if you don't give us somebody else, then we're going to go with the Republicans and we're going to pick somebody that you'll really hate. And that gives them, that's how these things often work. And at the end of the day, there'll be some kind of compromise and you'll get some person who's maybe not as bad as Nancy Pelosi, but not as good as somebody, a true moderate Democrat.
But who
would want?
Who would that actually be?
Oh, who knows?
It's going to be her twin sister, Pansy Pelosi. And it comes from the same district. So.
Gosh, that's the next Babylon Bee headline, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing that has to happen, somebody has to stand for election of speaker besides Nancy Pelosi. She's obviously going to stand for re-election, and it just depends on who is going to say, no, I would like to put my name in the hat. What I would love to see, and I think it's pretty unlikely, but it would be awesome, is if AOC actually goes ahead with her hubris, because she thinks she's a lot smarter than she is. And that's a dangerous combination when you have a media that loves you and you think you're smart when you're actually not smart at all. But if she were to raise her hand and say, you know what, I'm going to stand for Speaker of the House, Republicans get to vote on that too. It's not just a party vote. So it would be awesome if AOC says, I want to be Speaker of the House, and then every Republican in the House votes for her.
Yeah.
And let her be the Speaker of the House in the face of the Democratic Party for 2 years.
That would be kind of scary. I don't know.
You know what? That would be awesome. And I'm all for it. I really hope that, I know that the Republican leadership often listens to the podcast.
That's true.
And I hope that they're listening today, because they should take this incredible advice and use it. AOC for speaker. That's our official endorsement. I think that's our first endorsement ever, right? On In the Tank, we're officially endorsing AOC for Speaker of the House. So
Andy says, I think she's a lot smarter than the right gives her credit for. And I will say that there was a Snapchat thing that she did, or Instagram video that she did, where she didn't know what a dish disposal was, a garbage disposal. So,
in fairness, she'd probably had like 10 wine coolers by the time she made that. But
wine coolers.
Well, yeah, that's what the hipster congresswomen drink, right?
It was a White Claw.
Yeah, it was a White Claw. Yeah, she was probably 10 White Claws in. Look, I actually think that she is. I actually do think that she is pretty smart.
I really
we
got enough hate mail for you already, so let's bring that up. So Justin recently, pull up that sweet graphic, Andy. Justin, you recently wrote an article about what Joe Biden could do to help unify the country, and I think it was published in The Hill. And basically it comes down to, spoiler alert, that you think that he should open the door for more states' rights. So feel free to correct me on that oversimplification, but you would think that something as innocuous as that got you this much hate mail is kind of a shock. So that's why we're going to do our first ever edition of Justin's Hate Mail Bag. So feel free to...
Everybody hates Justin.
Where's the song? Isaac makes songs.
That's true, Isaac.
And so we think Isaac should be the one that makes the theme song. Yeah, make the jingle for it.
I will do that in a heartbeat.
We totally should do that.
If I can to Justin and we play it on the show.
Yeah, I totally think you should do that. I mean, I had no intention of asking you to do it, but now that you've gone through puberty and your voice is a little deeper, I think it's just right. So
I'm gonna have a Sinatra sounding voice. I can feel it.
I can. I believe it. All right. So basically, the article is it's not just a states' rights article. I mean, it is largely a states' rights article, but the argument is pretty simple. It's look, not just Democrats, but Republican presidents as well, including Donald Trump. In the past, they have been totally and completely, not totally unwilling. Republicans are sometimes willing to do this, but for the most part, no matter who's in power in Washington, D.C., they want to make the decisions in Washington, D.C., and they don't want to give states and local governments the ability to make their own decisions. And if we had a system of government that promoted the concept of federalism in a very real, tangible way and gave through block grants, meaning financial funding from the federal government to the states. And if we had a system that relied on block grants so that the federal government gives money to the states and say, here, this money has to be spent on healthcare reform, but you guys figure out how to shape your healthcare system in the way that your citizens believe is going to be the most effective way. Chart your own course, make your own decisions, be laboratories of liberty, and let's find out which ideas work and which ideas don't work. It's a really simple concept.
So you got like a smaller bureaucracy at the state level that would be coordinating the use of this money. It'd be more representative of the population that's getting this money spent on it versus, some giant federal bureaucracy. So yeah, it's obviously something that we could all get behind, except for all these people that sent you hate mail. So I asked you to pick your top three pieces of mail. So let's hear it. Start with number 3. We'll work up.
Well, I don't have them ranked.
Oh,
so
well, come on.
I didn't know was I supposed to rank them?
Save the best for last.
I can't save the best for last. There's too.
Doxing people. So,
yeah, I'm not going to dox anybody. I mean, look, I get lots of hate mail for these kinds of things. This one is pretty standard hate mail. Subject line is "What a dumb article."
That's pretty tame.
What a dumb article. Inside it says. I'm guessing that they're referring to Biden here. I mean, he's already hiring Republicans. Really? Question mark. I don't know what that means. What Republicans? Who?
John Kasich.
Did he actually hire John Kasich?
Yeah, he's in charge of the Pacific.
He's on his raft already.
He's already out there.
He's the admiral of the Pacific Fleet.
Yeah, you're right. That's
he's cleaning up plastic.
He's the MacArthur of our generation.
Yeah. That's just stop trying to. You're a troll. You're just trying to troll me. It's awful. All right, another one was this is the subject line: considerations on if Joe Biden wants to unite America, he must do this immediately. It begins, Mr. Hawkins, not my name. My name is Haskins, not Hawkins.
Trash bins, yeah.
I am very glad to see someone advocating solutions or possible paths. Whatever the hell that means.
Okay, this sounds good.
However, your proposal depends on people never moving between states for travel, employment, education, you name it. I don't know why this person thinks that. And then he writes in parentheses, I once needed out-of-state care while traveling and couldn't get my insurance to cover it. Had to pay out of pocket. Don't know what that has to do with anything. But, he says, people do need to travel between states to work. Truckers, for example. Yes. And then he says this, germs do not respect state borders. Neither do pollutants. If one state decides to have a lax approach to either of these issues, meaning a lax approach to germs, is that what you're saying?
We shouldn't have
it
states
does
anymore.
and will affect the neighboring state's healthcare. just as the interstate highway system depends on a certain level of federal funding and interstate cooperation, so too must this. You do seem to acknowledge the funding aspect, which I do, so I don't know why he went through all that. But I am surprised that you seem to think that people and illness vectors are essentially stationary. Did I say that? Did I say that germs are stationary? No, I never said that.
Are you going to email the podcast to these people?
Yeah.
Like I should. You know, I really
should. You should clip out the section and say, here's my response to you.
Yeah, and then there's going to be a response to the response segment next week.
I thought this was a segment on hate mail, and that's stupid mail. I don't see the hate yet. I'm very underwhelmed.
There's overlap. I mean, you can't. I mean, it's hate mail. I mean, come on.
Right. Third one.
I lost the third one.
What?
I'll have to go through it and find it.
Oh my gosh. Well, that was You Suck with Justin Haskins.
I think it's Mr. Hawkins, actually.
Mr. Hawkins.
I think I've gotten my name wrong this whole time. And
I think it's hate mail with Justin Trashbins. I think that's the...
We should set up...
That's pretty good.
There was one in here. Here we go. Article about Biden. I just found this one. I just happened to catch your article about ... what Biden must do to unite America. I don't know why he's being so dramatic about that. I don't have a lot of time. Okay. But the quick answer is
for time, but I'm going to email a stranger on the internet about their article.
I don't have a lot of time, but the quick answer is that he should do the exact opposite of what your narcissistic, sexist, homophobic, insane, anti-science, XXX grabbing, conspiracy clinging, disloyal, anti-immigrant, anti-intellectual nutcase. I get those.
Is that the end?
There was no noun. He missed the noun. You are welcome. Period. Signed, Dr. C. Dow.
See? Now that's what I'm talking about.
See, that's saving the best for last. That is good right there.
And I just stumbled on that one. That's
Dr. What's his name? Dr. what? How?
Dr. C. It's like initials, I guess. Dr. C. I shouldn't read what his name is.
Well, too late. You already did it. So yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what his name is. Dr. C.
Good job. He's going to be a recurring guest on the show, I think.
C. Thomas Howell. Yep.
C. Thomas Howell.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that was good stuff. So we should do the opposite. So let's just get rid of states' rights. How about that? Just have one, government to rule them all. One government to bind them. And, in the darkness, whatever the saying is from that lame movie. But anyways, so the last little segment here. Thanks for that, though. That was great. Mailbag. Fantastic. Last thing. Now, this was at the request of Isaac Orr. Find him at centeroftheamericanexperiment.org or com. We want to talk about stealing the election. So don't deny this, Isaac. This was your response to what should we talk about on this week's podcast.
It was in all caps. It was very serious. It was like in all.
Yeah. So not only is this for Isaac, this is also for Jim, because I know that Jim needs an outlet to vent all of his, theories about Trump actually being the victor of the election. So I will say that. I stay kind of, an ear to the ground when it comes to some of this stuff. I still think that there's like a 15-20% chance that something crazy happens and Trump ends up winning this. But it seems like there's like a million stories out there, Jim. So between dead people voting, poll watchers not being able to be in the room, but then there's other stuff like, I don't know if you've seen this, the concept of like a bellwether county. Have you heard this one?
Mm-hmm.
So apparently there's like 12 different counties throughout the United States that you can generally count on the results of those counties predicting who the winner of the presidency is. There's like 10 or 12 or something like this. And generally speaking, they're like 95% correct. Well, this time around, they were like 85% wrong. Only like 3 of these 12 counties picked Biden to win. And they're all just wrong. So, yeah, maybe it's just a crazy anomaly, I guess. But there seems to be a whole lot of those. And there's also the stories about the 450,000 votes that just had Biden, didn't vote for anyone else, just was Biden. So it seems like there's a whole lot of hinky stuff. And then just today, Donald Trump tweeted about Dominion vote counting machines and how those erased millions of Trump votes and flipped them to Biden and all of this stuff. So, Jim, and is this all just conspiracy theory stuff? Should I just read the New York Times and have them discount all of it, or is there some truth to here?
The New York Times had a headline, what was it, yesterday or 2 days ago, saying that there was no evidence of voter fraud anywhere. No, as in zero, nada, zilch. And that, of course, is a lie because the New York Times is fake news. And, there is proof of dead people voting in swing states. There are dead people voting in Nevada, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania. There is a certain level of fraud that happens in every election, and usually it doesn't matter. You are not a conspiracy theorist if you start looking at the statistical anomalies of some of these vote results that just have never happened before and don't make any sense. When you hear stories, and look, I don't. It's not that you either believe these things or you don't believe them. It's that you just want a plausible explanation.
Sure.
I want a plausible explanation for how Joe Biden's vote total went straight up and caught up to Donald Trump in Wisconsin at between 3 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd like to hear an explanation as to why in some counting stations, or where they're counting the votes, where poll officials told the Republicans who were observing it that we're done counting for the night. We're going to pick it up again in the morning. See you later. The Republicans leave, and then the count continues. Did that happen? Let's see some evidence for it. There's the postal worker who said that he has not recanted his story, despite what the New York Times has said, who said that the postmaster at his postal service workplace said, hey, all those ballots over there, post or back date them so that they seem like they came in on time so that we can have them counted. There are scores, hundreds, maybe stories across the country of very strange things going on. There was one. There is a certain percentage of people who only vote for president, right? And I think this was in Philadelphia, where the number of people who didn't vote for who voted only for president but voted for President Trump, out of some 2 million votes, the number of people who only voted for Trump was fewer than 1,000. It was like 800 something. In Philadelphia, I think it's Philadelphia. I'd have to look it up again. But in that same place, again, some 2 million people or 2.5 million people voted for Joe Biden, and 95,000 of those ballots came in just for Biden. Now, that could be legit. I want it looked into, because that is extremely anomalous. And there are things like this all over the country. There's statistical analysis. Statisticians have been talking about this on social media and other places, that there are basically statistical analysis that you can do and that you should do to identify something that is really out of the ordinary. And in several places, suddenly all of these Biden votes showed up out of nowhere all at once, and it doesn't make any statistical sense. And one last thing is that I find it extremely, and I want this looked into. It's not a conspiracy theory. You just want it looked into, because this is very, very strange. That it seems like almost all of these anomalies happen just in the states where Biden needed them. I'd like to know, are those anomalies that you're seeing in Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Michigan, are those happening in Texas? Because that was supposedly a swing state, according to the media leading up to the election. Did that happen in Florida, which has always been a swing state? Did that happen in North Carolina, which was very close? If it turns out that just on a very cursory level, and nobody in the media is curious about this, that these anomalies only seem to happen exactly where Joe Biden needed them, that itself is a larger anomaly. These things need to be looked into, and half this country, 72 million people who voted for Donald Trump, are not going to accept the results of this election if they don't think it was fair. And the way you do that is you do recounts, you do audits, you investigate what looks to be way beyond the regular vote fraud that happens, where people, ballot harvest or vote for dead people and that sort of thing. This is extremely important. And if it only happened in these places where Joe Biden needed them, that is more than just fishy. That looks like widespread, coordinated fraud.
Justin, you could be the voice of reason. Do you have anything to respond with that?
No, I mean,
so we're out of time. I think we're going to just wrap up the episode here.
It's true.
Yeah, that's what he was going to say. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Take Podcast. Join us every Friday for a new episode of In the Tank. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. We'd greatly appreciate it. You can find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, pretty much everything nowadays. If you'd like, you can follow us on Socialist Twitter at In the Tank Pod. If you have comments, suggestions, questions, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Justin, where can the fine people find you?
Oh, what? Am I allowed to talk now? Is that how this is work? It's at Justin T. Haskins on Facebook and Socialist Twitter, or you can send your hate mail at dkendal@heartland.org. That's DKENDAL, dkendal@heartland.org.
That's true. 1L. Send us your best pictures of John Kasich too. Jim Likely, where can the fine people find you?
At J Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always visit heartland.org.
Isaac Orr, same question.
On Twitter at the Fracking Guy, also on Parler, like every once in a while, at the same name, and at AmericanExperiment.org. You can also find me writing fan fiction about John Kasich.
Awesome. Can't wait for that one. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel and consider donating to the Heartland Institute to support more vibrant free markets, greater individual liberties, and more videos like this one.